I would like to start just by saying thanks to Riga Sarvanitis and to Ariadna. You're there. Thank you very much for everything, for the invitation and everything you're doing here in this colloque. And I'm part of the scientific committee, so I'm also very happy to be participating in the GRIP. And so for today, what I prepared here is, I think with this I'm going to change, right? Yes. Is what I think is, I hope, a perspective from the periphery on the circulation of knowledge. But given that the GRIP is a research center on the global research, I was thinking first to say that I'm talking here about scientific knowledge, because we know that we have many types of knowledge and we can do research, of course, on different type of knowledge. So I'll be talking in general and practically in the whole speech on the circulation of scientific knowledge, but at the end I will come to what we could call like a métissage type of knowledge, an academic knowledge and a university knowledge, that is the knowledge that comes from third mission at the university. And in Latin America, this is a very extended type of co-production of knowledge, and that is changing a lot related to the open science movement. And so I will try to come to other types of knowledge that are around us and given to the change that's coming with open science. And so for the first thing I would like to do, and I'm going to try to put this, if I can, yes, is to try to present a general scheme on what I believe is maybe the history of the circulation of knowledge in my perspective, and I hope in the perspective of the periphery. First of all, to try to tell you that I think that we all may share, several studies have said some things about this, that the scientific knowledge that for a few last decades have been developed is featured by two separate and apparently non-connected processes. One is the centrality and the universality of academic knowledge that you can see on the top of this scheme. This is observable, among other things, in mainstream scientific publishing. I mean, the Scopus, Web of Science, those type of journals. But in the parallel, you have in the top of this scheme what normally we call peripheral science, marginal science, and there are a lot of circuits that are at work in that is called generally the peripheral science. Those circuits have been at work at the same time. I mean, it's not like the mainstream circuit was before and then came these new alternative or marginal type of circuits. And so if we go to the history of this mainstream circuit that is supposedly in the top of this hierarchy, there are many studies. I'm not going to be able to go deep in this, but there are many studies that say that the accumulation of prestige, the accumulation of centrality can be attributed maybe to three factors at least. First of all, the hypercentrality of English. It's pretty evident that Scopus, Web of Science, those type of journals are mostly in English, 95, 96%. And even in European countries and in the so-called periphery, the journals are and have been shifting to English, and that is indeed the case. Afterwards, we have also bibliometric indicators, like, for example, the impact factor. This has made a very important performative role towards converting this worldwide system in a very prestigious type of system, because the impact factor, which measures the citations of a journal, has become like a currency, right? And in the industry of creating prestige. And last but not least, the university rankings, because the university rankings have also taken these type of bibliometric indicators. So this general picture and the race of academic productivity that it seems to push looks like really a global situation, and most of us, the scholars, live within this type of race. But even in critical perspectives, this idea is reinforced in the South, because from the South, many studies and many of us tend to think that we are indeed marginal, that we are indeed peripheral. In my perspective, we have to change a bit this focus and to try to think that if all these circuits that you're going to start seeing in this scheme have started a long time ago and inhabit or coexist since a long time ago, then things are more complex than we think in the periphery, in the so-called periphery. Of course, we have semi-peripheries and all, but the language, the economic type of language that we use for this, the center, the periphery, or the semi-periphery, is really a limitation to understand the circulation of knowledge, in my perspective. And so, what happened, this is the case of Argentina that I'm going to speak to you in a moment, but what happened with this indeed efficient mainstream circuit that you can find there in the top? Of course, it was efficient, very efficient to gain recognition and international prestige, but in the South and in the other circuits, science kept evolving. And in this scheme, you're looking at Argentinian national field. And so you may be wondering, well, what's the importance of a national field if what we're looking for is for international recognition? Well, in the place where you see evaluative cultures, I'm speaking of research assessment, I think that this is a very important factor in keeping at least the multi-scale or the 4 levels or scales of circulation that I'm talking about. Because the evaluative cultures or the research assessment systems are anchored to the national fields, even to institutional level. And so the national field in terms of Bourdieu or the national governments or the local governments are completely involved with the research assessment system, and this is definitely an important thing in order to create ideas of where you can circulate, where you should publish. And so in the case of Argentina, for example, you can understand the existence of all these circuits in the same country if you look here at the different type of prestige that is at work in the different circuits in the national level. In Argentina, we have 2 different classifications for researchers. It is a very singular case. I recognize Argentina is a very particular case. We have 2 classifications, one in the universities and one in the National Scientific Agency. And in the National Scientific Agency, mainly in the social sciences, for example, regional prestige coming from the Latin American journals is at work, and it's very important, and it's rewarded by the research assessment system, something that's not happening, I think, maybe Matthias can tell us later, in Mexico, because in Mexico the mainstream indicators are really very highly valued. But in Argentina, we also have the CONICET, where all these indicators are really the most important indicators for evaluating a professor. And so the truth is that this international prestige that in Argentina we value a lot, even the regional or the mainstream, because they are both at work, at CONICET especially, normally it is the way in which the field and the research assessment system is taking all these these publications and rewarding it in order to be accepted or not in promotion, in tenure, etc. But there are also local circuits, as you can see there. And what are these local circuits? These are at work because at the universities, this other national classification not only accepts, but it's really reinforcing the national journals, writing in Spanish. And so you can be a professor at the university and never have published in English, never. Even you can be a professor at the university and never have been published outside Argentina. And you can have the most important category. So I take the Argentinian example because it is very singular, but it means that you have a country in which you can have the mainstream circuit with a lot of force at CONICET in the exact and natural sciences. You can also have a transnational circuit, very important in open science, that is valued, for example, in the agrarian science, in the engineering science, and the Latin American circuit, which is very important, especially at CONICET in the social sciences and humanities, and the local circuits, of course, at the universities. So my general proposal is to try to use the idea of circuit and the idea of a national field to understand how this is working in Latin America, and particularly in the periphery, in creating what we could call double-headed elites. One elite that is really circulating in the local language and in the local publications, and the other one that is attempting at least to gain international recognition through the international publishing. And now, if I can go to the next, I would just say a word about the regional circuit that is very important in Latin America, which is a Latin American intellectual space that has at least 200 years of existence. This may be a difference with other regions in the South. This Latin American intellectual space even can be compared and is, I think, a lot more consolidated than the European intellectual space if you compare it in the intellectual sense, because the Latin American intellectual space started at least in 1798 with all the independence process and the literature that started between our independent leaders. But afterwards, in the second phase that you can see there from 1948, regionalization was stimulated by different regional institutes and intergovernmental organizations. There you have the FLACSO, CLACSO, all these regional institutes that started stimulating research in a regional level. And more recently, you have a Latin American regional circuit of publications. And it is, we could say, at the avant-garde of what is called the open access, because we have at least 7,000 journals in Latin America that are indexed by Latindex, Cielo, or Redalic. And these 7,000 journals are 95% diamond access, which means the authors don't pay to publish, and the people don't pay to read, right? And these are major in more than a half university journals. I mean, edited by the university publishers. And then after that, you have many of these 7,000 journals just from scientific societies and not the big publishers. The big publishers, Elsevier or all the ones that you know, only own 2% of these 7,000 journals. And so we have a very dynamical regional circuit, and I'm going to go on to the next now, which takes us now to the impact of open science worldwide and what's happening with Latin America that was really like, I don't know in English the word for precursora, but it was like in the avant-garde, precursory, I think you say, of what is now the movement of open science. Just to remind everybody, or those who don't know too much about this movement, but this is part of our daily dialogue in general at the universities, open science means not only the open science to scientific knowledge through the data, through the software, and of course open access publications, also the existence of open science infrastructures to share all this data, and this means interoperability, and this takes us to the tensions between, or the inequalities and the digital divide between countries, and how this is going to be an impact for the South. Then the open dialogue with other knowledge systems, and the openness to what is called citizen and participatory science. This is changing a lot in Latin America, the view of what is strictly scientific knowledge or academic knowledge. And that's when I think that this third mission type of knowledge comes at work. And so now let's see in Latin America, what does this mean? What will be the Latin American road to open science, and what impact is this going to have in the historical Latin American space and open access movement that we have since at least 2 or 3 decades. First of all, in Latin America, we have national information systems that have been developed since the 1950s. I mean, the national documentation centers, big libraries at the major public universities. In general, this circuit is managed mainly by public funds, and it is a dominantly public type of circuit. And we also have indexing systems, local indexing systems, or we could say regional indexing systems that exist since 1975. Clase periódica were generated by the National University of Mexico and converted now in what it's called BIBLAT, but they exist since 1975. After that, we have another interesting thing. 4 countries in Latin America already have an open access and open data national laws. We also have now in progress 2 projects for what we can call CRIS. I don't know if you're familiar with this. These are the current research information systems, which try to integrate information systems on people, on projects, and on the research itself. And so there's one in Peru and one in Brazil. We have also regional networks and publishing databases, as I already mentioned, Latindex, Cielo, Redalic, and Biblat. And we have all digital libraries that were digitalized, but were born, like Bireme for Health in 1967, and of course CLACSO, the Latin American Council of Social Sciences, created in 1967. And we have a regional repository federation, which is called La Referencia, that harvests 10 countries and 790 institutions and their journals. And so you have more than 3 million documents. It is very important, the database on doctoral and master dissertations. And we have also, and the last part of this scheme is the regional tradition of university extension. This is something that can really boost citizen and participatory science because it benefits from a long existence, interactions between the university and the community. And I think that one of the most important things in this interoperability that we're looking for is to add in those CRIS an extension component. And so I think that this is going to really provoke a change, and our Latin American circuit that was supposedly the peripheral and the non-mainstream type of circuit will have a lot to say in the open science movement. And so to end here, I would like to propose a change. It's like I have completely changed the first scheme that you saw, that it was completely hierarchized. I don't know if that's the way to pronounce it. So hierarchized. You had the North, you had the South, right? Now, I think that in the open science movement and at this precise moment, if we understand that research assessment systems in the local institutional level or in the national level really can change many things in terms of, for example, changing or making the shift from impact factor to socially relevant science. Well, I'm proposing you here, do you remember those TV programs that you could spin a wheel and you can gain like some kind of a prize if you spin it correctly? Well, I think that the local circuits really exist not only in the South, also in the North. I really think that they exist even in the central countries. And if you take that and you just shift all these components and all these circuits, you can find an equilibrium between the global standards and the local standards that you have to spin and think for each institution and for each country. And I think that that's going to make our science really a multiscalar national field and also a multiscalar circuits, because at the end I think that the institutions themselves, the universities, are all really multiscalar and not just concentrated in one of the circuits. And so I think that's my proposal, and I'll leave it here. Thank you very much.